All right, the Associated Press poll is out. Georgia will go into the season as the number one team in the country in both polls. They will be the consensus number one team when they kick off with Clemson. And I'm not saying that that's anything surprising. I think this is something that was coming no matter what. Georgia just, I think Ohio State, who wound up number two, is a team to watch for sure. Check out our buddies at Red Zone with this neat little shirt here, by the way, if that's something that you like. But back to what I was saying, the Dogs with 46 first place votes, Ohio State 15. So the media a little bit more interested in Ohio State possibly taking over Georgia for the number one spot. And we'll just see how these teams play as time goes on. Is this important? The consensus, first of all, we've had consensus number one teams coming into the season for a long time now. Last time that we did not have just one number one team, AP and coaches, was in 2012. That was when Les Miles and the LSU Tigers split the number one ranking with USC, and Lane Kiffin. Believe it or not, Lane Kiffin was the head coach at USC at the time. Neither team ended the season in the top 10. Lane Kiffin's Trojans wound up at 7-6 that year with a loss to Georgia Tech in the Sun Bowl. That's a tough one right there. If you're starting the season number one and you end it with a loss to Georgia Tech in the Sun Bowl, no wonder he got fired. But the last time a number one team won the national championship was, any guesses? It didn't end up well for Georgia, that's for sure. It was when Alabama won the national championship in 2017. And from that point forward, the number one team in the country has not won it. So in 17, Alabama won it. 18, Alabama came into it as number one. They did not win the national championship that season. 19, it was Alabama again. They did not win it. LSU did. In 20, we changed it up. We went with the Clemson Tigers. They did not win it, getting blown out by Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. 21 was Alabama. Georgia won it. 22, I believe, was Alabama as well. And they won it. Georgia won that one as well. And then, of course, this past season, Georgia being the number one team and did not win it then either. So it's been a bit of a challenging thing to come into the season lately and win it all. But it's hard to win it all, no matter if you're ranked number one or number 10. But it does seem to me like whoever – I'm going to put it on the screen real quick, but when you take a look at this group in the top, if someone outside of the top 10 wins it, I would argue someone out of the top 5 wins it. I'd be surprised. Penn State's really good at being talked about. They're not really good at doing anything. Ohio State is clearly the team. I don't think there's much question about it. Ohio State is going to be Georgia's major competition in terms of sizing one another up and so forth. Now, Georgia's, I don't know that they're massively favored of Ohio State, but they are certainly clearly favored of Ohio State to win the national championship. The thing about both teams is, Georgia's got a really difficult schedule, no question. Of the top 5 teams that are ranked or that are in the, in terms of, you got Georgia at 1, Ohio State 2, Oregon 3, Alabama 4, Texas 4, Alabama 5, Ole Miss 6. Of the top 6 teams, Georgia's one of them. So there's 5 teams that they could play. They play 3 of them, and they play all 3 of them on the road. And one thing that Kirby was talking to boosters about the other day was he had never seen a schedule this difficult. And he doesn't really do hyperbole, but that certainly isn't in terms of when you look at the schedule that Georgia's got, because in years gone by, you'd have, I was about to say, you'd just have your SEC East schedule. This year in the SEC East, if it were constructed the way it once was, you'd have 3 top 15 teams. So that'd be 3 top 15 teams. That'd be more than the West. So, it's a challenging it's a challenging situation for everybody involved. I said that's more than that would be in the West. That would be the same amount as the West, I should say, because I don't have LSU highlighted. I can see that now. But you'd have to fight through those teams, and then of course Georgia would play Auburn. Well, I still got Auburn, and they got Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas as well from east of the or west of the Mississippi. Wait, now is that right? One of those teams is west of the Mississippi. Teams that are west of Georgia. So for Ohio State, though, they basically play Oregon, and that's it. There's not a lot in their way. Got Penn State and Oregon, Michigan. I don't. Oregon's their challenge. Like I said, if it came out, if someone outside the top 5 wins this, it will be something will have changed. Something I'll be surprised by that. I don't see that happening right now, but that's me. Hey, make sure we put this out on our newsletter first. Breaking news goes out on our newsletter. There's a link right down below. Check out the newsletter. There's a story that's being really well read about what we're hearing. That's on there. There's an insider report on there. There's a lot of stuff that if you're not taking advantage of a free newsletter, that's on you. Make sure you're checking that out right down below. But Ohio State, there's just not a lot in their way. There's just not a lot in their way. It's the Oregon game for sure is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. But they don't have Clemson. I'll just say it. They don't have Clemson. They have Georgia Tech. They're not playing road games at Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss. They are going to Oregon. That will be challenging. They're going to Penn State. Penn State, no. So we can act like Penn State's going to do something, but they don't. When you look at the Ducks, this isn't super challenging either. It's just not the SEC, and it's better. The Big Ten's better. There's no question. It's a better league. The addition of Oregon specifically makes it a better league. But the name UCLA hadn't done anything in football in probably decades, plural. So I can't remember the last time they were in a major bowl. Obviously UW this past year really, you're playing for the national championship. That's a big deal, period. But then you lose your entire coaching staff. You lose your superb quarterback, very good wide receiver. It's not going to be the same for UW. So Georgia will have to get through this. Ohio State's most difficult non-conference looks like Marshall, I think. So there's not a lot in their way here. There's not a lot in their way. I would think Georgia would maybe lose one game with this schedule that Ohio State's got. I don't know that they'd lose any. At Oregon would be very difficult. It just the flight, all of that stuff. But being ranked number 1 for Georgia, that's great. I think it gives them. I don't know that inside the program it makes one bit of difference where they're ranked. That's just not something that they discuss or talk about or whatever. It's just not a big deal. I think in terms of public relations and stuff like that. It does matter if you're number 1. I think people pay attention to that sort of stuff. They, it matters. Now it doesn't matter when you get on the field, but all of these things add up. And when you're trying to market your program, when you're trying to, be as big as possible, you should want to be number 1. Stuff like that. But it's not going to help you once you get on the field. You have to go do it. But I like these rankings for the most part. I think Missouri, is a better team than Florida State. Missouri may be a top 8 team. We'll see. LSU is going to score a lot of points. You've got Clemson situated between LSU and Tennessee. I think if Georgia were to play those 3 teams, it would be they could lose. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. They would not lose all 3 games. And I think if you play, Georgia plays Clemson 10 times, I would think the most Clemson will win that game will be twice. I don't think it would be, I'm not sure I could say that about Tennessee necessarily. LSU, that's a good question. Because I think there's so much that we don't know about them defensively. That's such a problem. But for Georgia, it does stand out that you're playing 3 top 6 teams on the road. That's really tough. If they were just playing them at home, those would be huge weekends in Athens. I mean, we just saw Ole Miss in Athens not that long ago. That was a good social weekend. But when Texas and Alabama come to Athens in 25, those will be big games. Those will be big, moments. That will be great for the economy in Athens. Georgia plays its biggest game every year in Jacksonville, and that's challenging. As big of a day, as awesome as home weekends are in Athens, no matter who Georgia plays, when you play your biggest game not in your home state, that Oklahoma knows what that's like. That's I don't know. That's tough. Oklahoma doesn't drive 6 hours or 7 hours to where they play. Dallas is halfway in between OU and Austin. So, but I think number one, what's the significance of it? I mean, I think it shows to me, in 21-22, you win the national championship. In 23-24, you start the season as the number one team. A lot of times, preseason rankings are backward looking. Sometimes they're just wrong. USC and LSU being ranked number one that in 12, I mean, that was just incorrect completely, particularly USC. So there's a lot of times that people get it wrong. Georgia or Ohio State should certainly be the number one coming into this thing. I think I don't really have a big giant question about the 15 people voting Ohio State number one. I think there's cause for that to be the case. One person has Oregon. No idiot voted Michigan number one like the coaches poll. I don't know who did that. And Michigan, the other thing about Michigan's kind of problem right now is, and needless to say, that they lost Jim Harbaugh. That was happening no matter what. You win the national championship, which is that's the only thing people in Michigan are going to care about, and God bless them. But everything else has been not great. I mean, this on the field, off the field stuff. With the cheating, the alleged cheating, that's looking worse now because their current head coach is tied up in it. It really looks bad. It looks bad, I have to say. So that was a huge win for them in the Rose Bowl. As soon as they won that game, they were almost certainly going to win the national championship. But it's not been rosy since for Michigan, and we'll see how they've recruited pretty well. I don't know. I don't know. Now, got Notre Dame at 7. Like, I don't like a lot of these teams. I'll just tell you right now. I mean, we can talk about a lot of stuff. At least Missouri has substance to themselves. I don't. I got to see it from Notre Dame. How many times? If they're only a 1-point favorite or dog against Texas A&M. The game's on the road. I get it, but I cannot remember the last time I watched Notre Dame and I was like, man, for sure. It's been a long time, probably since 19, maybe sometime in there, because like a season ago, just Clemson working that was a bad look. And then just kind of, I'm just looking at these other scores. They lost on the last play of the game to Ohio State. They narrowly beat Duke. They got worked by Louisville hard on the road. And then thumping SC, thumping Pitt. But just Clemson, they got worked on the road a few times, and that's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. No one cares about Stanford. So I don't think a top 7 team would get worked like that. But it's a new season. We'll just see. But there's not a lot in their way. I don't think they play. After the A&M game, they don't play a ranked team until they host Florida State in November. This is not a great schedule. They're doing what they can do considering their situation. It's not a great schedule. You're hosting Northern Illinois. You go to Purdue, which they play every year, but, I mean, it's trash. They host Miami of Ohio. They host Louisville. They host Stanford. They go to Tech. I think they're at the Dome, whatever. They play Navy. They host Florida State before they host Virginia. They go to I don't know why they're playing on the road against Army ever, and then they go to or just not in South Bend. I don't understand that. And then they play SC. They have those 4 games they're going to play no matter what, which is SC, Army, Navy, and Purdue. And so it makes it sort of like a chess game trying to get a decent situation when you're tied in with the ACC the way they are. You're not playing Clemson. I don't know. I mean, the only thing about Notre Dame for me, if they get into the playoff and they're at home, obviously there's a slight advantage to that, but what will they have earned? I mean, like, what does this schedule earn you? They're going to have to be, if they do not beat Texas A&M, I just don't know where you turn. If you're looking for quality here, there's not much on this thing. Like, they could use a trip to Ole Miss. You know what I mean? So if they lose to Texas A&M, and there's no certainty Texas A&M is good, for the record. I mean, like, that's not an A&M team that everybody's like, oh, for sure they're going to be a 10-win team. No, I mean, you look at A&M, McNeese, and then they go to the Swamp, they host Bowling Green, and then things really kick up for them. Like Arkansas, they can lose to Arkansas. Missouri, they can lose to Missouri. They go to State, no, they're not losing them. And then they host LSU, totally can lose. They play at Carolina, they can lose that game. And they play New Mexico State before traveling to Auburn, which is probably a toss-up, and then hosting Texas, which is not a toss-up. But they're hosting them. So, like, you could certainly see a 7-5 season for A&M. They could lose to Notre Dame. I mean, they could lose to Notre Dame, Florida, Arkansas, Missouri, LSU, South Carolina, Auburn, and Texas. Now, they won't lose to all of them, which is my point. But that's a lot of fingers in the air in terms of losses. So, for Georgia, can you count the 7 losses? I don't know that I can do that. So that's the difference in the two. The Dogs rank number 1. My rant is over. Thanks for watching.